Welcome to the week 3 module. This chapter is going to cover some very important concepts in relation to racism. The chapter in your book by Gonzalez, the Mexicanos text, there are some different elements in terms of war, politics, land, greed, the expansion of the West, the conflicts between Mexico and the United States, and some of the political concepts are fleshed out there about racism that was developed. Also, we have a selection from En aquel entonces, which talks about the origins of anti-Mexican sentiment in the United States. To go along with these two chapters, we also have a talk by Natalia Molina where she discusses scientific racialization and how Mexicans are often viewed as disease carriers. We see the view that Mexicans are criminals because of the crime at the borders, and so all of these ideas we're going to look at it kind of from a sociological perspective and a historical perspective, and we're going to analyze this concept. Just to be clear, racialization is the projecting of racial traits, characteristics, things that would be used to identify someone as different or as other, but not typically things that the people within that race would identify themselves as. And one thing we notice, at least sociologically, most of the naming and labeling and identifying and stereotypes, they always come from without of the group, not from within. Most names, even for religious groups, they're given to them by others. It's not that they say, we're going to call ourselves this, we're going to call ourselves Lutherans, we're going to call ourselves Protestants. Those are the kind of labels that the rest of society tends to put upon the people. Racialization isn't any different, but it's influenced by political, cultural, religious, and pseudoscientific ways. And we see this, even in, to give an extreme example, what is seen in World War II with the work of the Third Reich to identify Jews as scientifically corrupt, essentially bad or evil because of their quote-unquote Jewish blood, which there is no scientific support for that. But people accepted those pseudo-scientific views without question, really, because of some already cultural, political, and religious influences on how they viewed Jews. And so that concept of racialization, racism, prejudice, discrimination typically is not rooted in anything scientific, and it's not any different the way that Mexicans and Mexican Americans are often viewed. That idea that they are somehow inherently evil or bad because they're Mexican. Essentialism is a nonsense perspective. No one can be, by essence, evil, right? If you come from a perspective of the tabula rasa perspective, it's that we're all kind of a blank slate, and you can be nurtured and made to be really anything, good or bad, but not by any essence of the blood in your veins is of a particular race, and that makes you evil or bad. And those concepts are not rooted in anything scientific. But there is something extremely irrational about racism. And that is really kind of the scope of this module. We're going to look at kind of how it's irrational, how it's not rooted in anything really solid. There is nothing to say, to justify the reasoning behind why different races are viewed as, corrupt or bad or, criminal or disease carriers and things like that. One point that in the Paredes article from En Aquel Entonces, he says that part of what created such an anti-Mexican sentiment was really rooted in kind of an anti-Catholic sentiment that came over with the Protestant, colonies from England. And it's a really kind of an interesting perspective, and he supports it quite well. All that is to say, this week we will have a quiz that covers material from all three parts there, from the Gonzalez chapter 4 and the selection by Raymond Paredes about the origins of anti-Mexican sentiment, as well as the presentation by Natalia Molina. So all that information will be covered in the quiz for week 3, and you also will participate in discussion number 3, where you will, use that information from this module to help kind of formulate and discuss these ideas about racism and prejudice and discrimination. And I look forward to seeing our discussion on this topic. And of course, you must respond to 2 other classmates in order to receive full credit. And your posts should be at least 150 words in length. The critical analysis for this week: if you choose to write one for this week, you will write it on the En Aquel Entonces selection there by Raymond A. Paredes, The Origins of Anti-Mexican Sentiment in the United States. All right, do good work.